Hello, and so today is June 12th. It's June 13th,
Yes.
2018, and this is a Parkridge Oral History Project interview with Mr. Gordon Gibson, author of Southern Witness. Could you tell us a little bit about your book, Gordon?
Yeah, always happy
Yes.
to talk about the book. In some ways, it sums up a lot that I've worked on over many years. It talks about Southern Unitarians and Universalists in the Civil Rights era, the 50s and 60s. And it tries to be honest about what we did and some places where we've utterly failed to do what needed to be done. There are some very inspiring stories and a few really sad ones. It's not mostly about me because I'm just a tiny slice of that whole story. I did serve the congregation in Jackson, Mississippi for 15 years, but that was mostly after the real height of the organized civil rights movement. So I just make a cameo appearance in the book, which is appropriate. For the most part, it doesn't focus on the big civil rights campaigns because we weren't central actors in those. Most of us are white. These were black-led, mostly black-populated movements. I was in Selma. I'm not sure that I made an iota of difference in Selma. Selma made a huge difference for me because it truly radicalized me. It suggested to me the depth of the problems that this nation has with issues of race and issues of social justice. We just don't get it. And it kind of made me a permanent skeptic about what's really going on. So some people might say going to Selma damaged me. I think it changed me in very positive ways.
Yeah.
Or at least that's how I've lived. So anyhow, the book tells stories about people I've known or people I've found out about, and some very interesting ones. A few of them I encountered after they were long gone and I had to rely on documentary stuff. The one I'd really love to resurrect and have a conversation with, if I could bring him back for 30 minutes or an hour, I'd love to sit with him. Robert Williams.
Okay.
Robert Williams was elected president of the NAACP branch in Monroe, North Carolina, when the existing leadership was ready to just, close the branch. And Williams revitalized it. He didn't go for the school teachers. He went to the pool halls and said, hey, for $3 you can become a member of the NAACP and we can get some things done. And he was at that point a veteran of the Army and the Marine Corps, both of which had tossed him out because he didn't suffer fools gladly, and that was true even if the fools happened to be wearing insignia that ranked them above him. That doesn't work. And he had not completed a college degree. He'd attended 2 or 3 colleges, but he had come back to Monroe to try to make a difference where he'd grown up. And he did. He was a key component in getting some things organized there. including getting other former veterans organized so that if their community was attacked, it could exercise a degree of self-defense. And he got in trouble because there was a day when there were two separate court cases where clearly a white man was guilty of an assault on a black person. There was a situation that had happened in a hotel where a housekeeper had knocked on a room door, and somebody who was probably seriously hungover and not very nice even when he wasn't hungover, assaulted the housekeeper for interrupting his sleep. The other one was a rape case, or attempted rape, in which there was a white female witness to the assault. In both cases, the juries came back not guilty. And Williams made a comment about, well, if we can't cut justice in the courts, we need to have the means to enforce justice for ourselves. National NAACP did not like this.
No, I bet they didn't.
And so he was removed from the presidency locally. I think he was thereafter re-elected to it. But it also made him a national figure and created some trips to New York where he met interesting people like Malcolm X, like Fidel Castro coming to speak to the UN. So it made Robert Williams an important figure. And ultimately, in exercising this self-defense, there was an incident. I won't go into detail. Anyhow, Williams realized that he and his wife were being set up. So they fled the town, they fled the country, they slipped across the Canadian border, hid in Canada for a while, and then realized they were being tracked even there, and succeeded in getting to Cuba, where Fidel Castro welcomed them and provided Mr. and Mrs. Williams with an hour a week of fairly high-powered radio, which they used by broadcasting a weekly series that they called Radio Free Dixie.
Really? Oh, wonderful.
And things didn't go perfectly the whole time, and the welcome began to wear out in Cuba. And so he got permission to go to North Vietnam and further develop his understanding of what was going on in Vietnam, where there were already American troops advising. And from Vietnam, he moved to China, where he was welcomed by Zhou Enlai and Mao Zedong. There was an occasion on one big ceremonial day in which Robert Williams gave a broadcast radio address in Tiananmen Square.
Fascinating.
Ultimately, he worked through his legal problems, was able to come back to America, not face prosecution, I guess as long as he didn't go to North Carolina. And he became, he became a darling of black radicals, Revolutionary Action Movement, Black Panthers, and so on. I think his involvement there was more more as a symbol than as an active participant. They lived in Michigan on their return. And he became a significant resource for Americans trying to understand China. Because what other American had FaceTime with Mao Zedong or Zhou Enlai? I have this suspicion that Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon got their breakthrough partly using information from Robert Williams. So, interesting guy. When he died, he developed cancer. He was buried back in Monroe, wearing a suit that Mao Zedong had given him.
Oh, wonderful.
And one of the eulogists was someone he had worked with apparently a lot in Michigan, Rosa Parks.
Really?
So, fascinating guy. I'm not sure how long or how deep his involvement in the small Unitarian congregation in Monroe was, but I'd love to talk to this guy.
Oh, as would I, now that I've heard this, wonderful overview of his life story.
This was an opportunity to really encounter some amazing people, and try to capture their stories so that they're not forgotten forever.
Yes.
Because I think certainly today, but these days keep recurring. We need examples of engagement with social issues.
Yes, courage. Yeah, in the face of hard times. So where does your story begin? Where were you born?
I was born and raised in Kentucky. I'm descended from the first couple of European background married at what was then called the Falls of the Ohio. It's now called Louisville. I think my sister and I have broken that connection. She's now in Schenectady. I'm here in Knoxville. But there's been pretty continuous, apart from us, there's been pretty continuous residence in Kentucky, going back through the family tree. Went through the public schools in Louisville. My senior year in high school was the first year of token desegregation. And I guess because my parents were sized up as being kind of liberal, when a New York TV station wanted to do a program interviewing some students who were part of this first year of desegregation, I was the person tapped in my high school to be on the program. Except, in retrospect, what I'm remembering is this was all very cerebral. The kids who had transferred in from Central High School, the historically black school, were all sophomores or juniors. I was a senior. Seniors don't talk to sophomores and juniors unless they're very cute girls. So I didn't actually know any of the 4 or 5 kids, and I'm ashamed in retrospect. Yeah, these are kids who needed somebody to say hi to them. I never got around to that. So, from high school, went to college at Yale. I got into Yale not because I was brilliant, but because, well, 2 factors. From Kentucky, I don't get that many applications from Kentucky. Being exotic helps, and my father had attended Yale. Yale, so okay, that was a legacy. And a good influence on me in college was the chaplain who started at Yale my sophomore year, William Sloan Coffin Jr.
Okay.
And I got to know him pretty well. He had decided that it was important to reinvigorate the undergraduate board of deacons in the school chapel. And one way to make things more interesting was to have a token Unitarian on on the board. So I got to be a second token. And this meant that every other Wednesday night, we would sit in Bill's living room and talk about things relevant to Battelle Chapel, but also all sorts of world issues. And this is a guy who had served in the Army during World War II, then done college, started seminary, was recruited from seminary to join the newly formed Central Intelligence Agency because he was a Russian speaker, and they needed Russian speakers. So he had been around power. He had a real feel for social issues. Later went on to head SANE, Nuclear Freeze, served as senior minister at Riverside Church in New York. Had a real gift for words. Somebody who'd been at Yale at the same time he was, also a World War II veteran, was George H.W. Bush.
Yes.
What Bill had to say about George was, this is an example of skim milk rising to the top. Young people don't get that. They think it's all homogenized.
Yes.
But yeah. Bill's take on Unitarian Universalists is, it's amazing that such a thin theology can lead to such a thick social ethic. So, 3 years of association, one of them pretty close with this character, was very good for me.
I love those quotes.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was college. Went from there to seminary. Flirted with taking some time between college and seminary. I'm glad I didn't, because if I had, I wouldn't have wound up meeting Judy and getting married to her. She made sad, but if I had, it would have been an interesting addition to my resume. Bill Coffin had gotten involved in something called Operation Crossroads Africa, and had spent the summer of 1960 in Africa working with a student group on some project, and encouraged a lot of us to think about signing up for teaching assignments in Africa. I put in an application to teach in Nigeria, and I think this was torpedoed partly by one of the first batches of Peace Corps volunteers were assigned to secondary schools in Nigeria.
Yeah.
I think they had more than enough young American teachers, and they didn't need, but probably really didn't need me, but
So you were at Yale, and where did you go to seminary?
Went to seminary at Tufts University in Medford.
Yeah.
Neighborhood of Boston.
Yeah.
And then after seminary, served a small Boston area congregation in West Roxbury.
Okay.
And I explained to people marginally familiar with Boston, West Roxbury is where the Irish cops lived who created problems policing in Roxbury.
Yeah.
two very different
Different
communities.
yeah.
But it, and it was early in my settlement with that congregation that I'd gotten okay from the church board to spend a week or 10 days in Mississippi. The denomination was encouraging us, encouraging ministers to take part in the work of the Delta Ministry. The National Council of Churches had set up this religiously based project in Mississippi. And the board said, okay. And then, sort of the last minute, early January, the Unitarian Universalists Association asked two of us to shift gears. Instead of going to Mississippi, check out a project that was just starting up. Southern Christian Leadership Conference work on voting rights in a place I had never heard of at that point called Selma, Alabama. And so in late January, I was ordained and installed on a Sunday afternoon. Tuesday, I was on a plane to Montgomery.
Wow.
And as I understood our assignment, it was to observe and report back, would there be a role for Unitarian Universalists in this voting rights campaign? And it took me several days to figure out. Observing only is a cop-out. My partner in this, older, wiser, had taken part Friday morning in a demonstration and had been arrested. And at that point, they arrested the group he was in and released them on personal recognizance. So we assumed this meant jail's full, they're just doing this. This is what's happening currently. So the following Tuesday, there was going to be another demonstration. I finally figured out by that time, okay, you can't just observe. And besides, they're doing this catch and release thing. Well, they'd found more space. So
Are you saying you got arrested?
Yes, I got arrested. And just recently, some journalists who are doing research located in a pile of discarded documents my mugshot.
For posterity.
Which I'm now using on Facebook.
It's a blaze of honor.
Yes, it is.
A badge of honor.
But it irritates me if they were tossing this.
Yes. Priceless commodity.
Yeah. But they arrested us for contempt of court because we were violating a court order from the county court judge that any gathering of more than 2 people, particularly in and around the courthouse, was illegal. Now, this local court order had been taken to federal court and, of course, ruled utterly, absurdly, totally unconstitutional. But that didn't keep Judge Hare from enforcing his court order. So they arrested us, booked us, obviously photographed us, and marched us into the courtroom. And the trial was pretty much over before a lawyer showed up to try to represent us. They sentenced us. They tried us as a group, very fair trial, with the judge serving as judge, assistant prosecutor, and prosecution witness. And then he called us up individually for sentencing. And each of us was sentenced to 5 days in jail, $50 fines, fines not paid, worked off at $3 a day at hard labor. And he did ask each of us is there anything you want to say? The very best statement, the primo statement, was by Ralph Featherstone, who was a snake worker.
Okay.
And Ralph was wearing the snake student nonviolent coordinating committee uniform, bib overalls. And so when Judge Hare said, Ralph Featherstone, he stood up and walked forward and said, he hiked up the bib overalls and said, Your Honor, where I come from in Washington, D.C., I'm accustomed to being addressed as Mr. Ralph Featherstone. Judge Hare turned a pretty color. But yeah, I also was unwise enough to have a little something to say. And somehow I didn't lengthen the sentence. But one of the things I did mention was that my mother had mentioned to me that, oh yeah, we have an ancestor who's buried in Selma. Okay, this counts for something. So I did mention this to Judge Hare. Anyhow, we wound up serving 7 days of the 5-day sentence. And as I said earlier, this is an experience that has permanently shifted my perceptions of life.
What was that like, being in jail? For not really committing any crime.
No, for attempting to commit justice.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a strengthening experience. It gives you a real focus. And not to be done randomly, but there are occasions, yeah. In some ways, I learned more in jail than in Yale. For example, I was a history major at Yale. I don't remember Africa ever coming up in the course of the history curriculum. Maybe in passing as European explorers, mention of a slave trade, but it was tangent and didn't really hear the history of Africa. In jail, Ralph Featherstone gave us an introductory lecture on African history. Educational experience.
Yes.
Not available in New Haven.
No.
Then.
Yeah.
I think it is now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But did it make you question your conviction? Your religious conviction?
It deepened. It deepened the convictions. And it's been an invaluable connection point. Well, when we were released, one of the people who'd been jailed earlier and was released earlier was on Dr. King's staff in working in the area of publicity, PR. And okay, here two white guys who are now out. It was a day when Dr. King was downtown observing people at the courthouse. They weren't doing further arrests. I'm not sure why they weren't, but they weren't. So Chuck hustled us down there, and there's a picture that turns up, and sometimes I'm turning it up, of Dr. King speaking with the two of us, newly released white guys from Boston. We were news as hundreds and hundreds, probably 1,000 or more black Selmans hadn't been photographable news. Sad commentary, but you know, let's be real. AP thinks, oh, this picture tells a story, something different. So that picture gives me more credit than I'm due. People often exaggerate my connection to Dr. King. I did not know Dr. King. I met Dr. King very briefly twice. I did not know Dr. King.
That's more than a lot of people.
Yeah, that's more than a lot of people, but this does not make me just super tight with Dr. King.
And I suspect, Gordon, that for white people seeing that news article, it plants a seed of empathy to see a white person acting on behalf of blacks based on their, your religious conviction as a Christian. And a lot of the white Southerners considered themselves Christians. And it provides sort of a bridge for getting to that place where you could be in communion with Dr. King and fellow Christians who are perhaps a different color.
But in more recent years, starting 2004, Judy and I, now a group of us, have been leading civil rights pilgrimages to places like Selma. And in Selma and Marion, to have been incarcerated at Camp Selma, there are people, okay, instantly we're friends, we're compatriots.
Yes, you're like blood brothers and sisters.
I had 2 or 3 years ago, I had about a 45-second opportunity to converse with John Lewis.
Oh, wow.
And we got to agree. That concrete floor at Camp Selma is a really hard, cold sleeping surface. It's that kind of connection. On my wall here, in my office area, I have pictures that I took of Malcolm X. This was less than 2.5 weeks before his assassination. A few years ago, out at Highlander, I was in a workshop, and a workshop on the arts and social justice work, and I counted off and got in small groups, circles, and supposed to go around the circle and share an instance. I forget what I'd had in mind, but it's the last minute I said, the music in Selma. And the next person said, oh, me too. That's, I had just come on SNCC's staff there.
Yeah.
And we said, we need to talk.
Yes.
And it turned out she had just started on SNCC's staff in January. And early February, she and the project director in Selma drove over to Tuskegee to persuade Malcolm, after his speaking engagement at Tuskegee, to extend his trip by a day and come over to Selma and speak Thursday afternoon. And had then driven him back to the airport in Montgomery. And I said, I have some pictures that day. Actually, I have some of them in a form. I could email them to you. Would you like? Oh, yes, I don't have any pictures of that. So I emailed her pictures, and she said, oh, that's me. There's a picture of her sitting next to Malcolm.
Oh, my
Brown Chapel.
goodness.
So offered to
Yeah.
get prints made of that and I
Yeah.
think one other and send them to her. Sadly, I was hoping that this would develop into an interesting friendship. Fascinating person. Sadly, got a phone call saying, I don't know if you'd heard, Faye passed. We came across your pictures and we're wondering, could we get permission to use them in our memorial?
How wonderful.
Yeah. I said, oh, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. And,
what perfect timing.
Yeah. Well, what was...
To have her family.
Yeah. Well, and I think this was really civil rights family doing this.
Yeah.
I realized I got that phone call on February 4th. It was a February 4th which had taken those pictures.
Really? Oh my goodness. What, like 40 years, 50 years later?
40, 45 years.
My goodness.
But, so, anyhow.
Yeah.
That Selma experience was kind of
formative.
more than very formative, more than kind of formative. Later in 1965, Judy and I were on vacation, late summer, visiting my parents in Kentucky, and our minister there got a phone call, or made a phone call to us. Hey, did you hear on the radio Don Thompson in Jackson, Mississippi was shot last night? Don was the minister of the Jackson, Mississippi congregation and had been shot by the Klan, critically wounded, but was expected to survive. And as Judy and I processed this, I don't have to be back to church for another couple of weeks. Those folks in Jackson have to be feeling pretty isolated. Let's see if they'd like for us to come down. So, our first exposure to Mississippi was driving down in August of 1965, a year after Freedom Summer, in our car with Massachusetts license plates. We debated stopping in Memphis and renting a car with more local plates. Decided, no, the point is to show up with Massachusetts license plates. And found a remarkably vibrant congregation that was carrying on, and Don was carrying on. One of my favorite things in the book is the note Don wrote. The settlement director had written him as he was recovering, saying, if you think the time to move on elsewhere has arrived, I'd be glad to help you find something. And Don wrote back and said, no, I think it may be important to stay on and, show some courage.
Like he hadn't shown courage already to be a poet.
But anyhow, this too was one of those things that had long-term results, because 4 years later, that congregation, which had gone 4 years without a minister because Don ultimately did have to leave the state because the Klan was going to try again and not miss. But the congregation muddled along without ministry, ministerial leadership. But they had some money and decided, we need to try again. So in 1969, Judy and I moved from Boston to Jackson. I went from being liberal in Boston to being a radical in Mississippi. I didn't change, but the location did. And, you know, I was a liberal in Boston. I am one of the few people still alive who can claim to have actively campaigned against Teddy Kennedy on the grounds that Teddy was insufficiently liberal.
I love it.
When he first ran for Senate, H. Stuart Hughes, who had been one of his professors at Harvard, ran as an independent candidate in that Senate race, saying if his name were Edward Moore instead of Edward Moore Kennedy, his candidacy would be a joke. And frankly, Hughes was closer on all the issues to where I was than Kennedy was at that point. Teddy grew a lot.
It took a while.
Yeah.
Got there.
Yeah.
Lots of bumps in the road.
There were some bad bumps in the road. But he was good at the end. I was right in the moment. Yeah. But anyhow, we had 15 years in Mississippi in various roles, 3 years as parish minister, full-time parish minister, and 7 years working for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. I got to be your friendly federal investigator.
Oh.
Really got to know the state. I traveled broadly in Mississippi, investigating employment discrimination claims, and enjoyed that when it was civil rights work. Did not enjoy it when it became more bureaucratic, when we were processing files rather than investigating charges. And toward the end of that time was back in 2 part-time ministries, and ultimately quit EEOC. Judy was just starting a full-time job for the first time since we'd had children. So she became our steady income source. I became the minor income source and primary house spouse. And that's a good experience.
Pretty revolutionary for the time.
Yeah, it's something that I wish more guys did, because it's good for us to deal with household routine and kid issues and all that stuff. It's very good. It was for me.
Was that difficult? Like, did you find a sense of community among part-time stay-at-home parents?
Not really. I guess by then I had good enough self-identity. I wasn't too dependent on external support. There were times when Judy and I found, it's odd shifting roles like that. I still remember the night that she got home from the office and said, well, I guess we should get dinner started pretty soon. I said, no, it's about 10 minutes, it should be ready. Well, okay, in that time, I could start some laundry. It's done.
So you're very efficient.
I'd taken away what had been her roles.
Oh, yes.
And, we're pretty good partners now. We've learned.
You've worked out the kinks in marriage. After how many years?
Let's see, 63 to 50. 2008, it's going to be 55 this August. So, anyhow, we moved from there to Elkhart, Indiana, and served the congregation there 20 plus years. That's a long time to stay with one group, but we were having fun, and I think doing some good stuff. And in Mississippi, folks who've been involved in civil rights are a dime a dozen. I did not stand out in that bunch. I was, yeah, okay, yeah, fine. You had some glancing connection. That's, yeah, I appreciate that. In Elkhart, Indiana, no, there's
You really are quite unique in terms of your.
a little bit different, and so there was some. There were some good opportunities that opened up, serving on the Human Relations Commission and serving on the NAACP board, and pushing, well, various sort of dialogue efforts that helped maybe a little bit. And then in 2005, I retired. Judy had retired a year and a half, 2 years earlier. And we decided, where do we want to live in retirement? Wanted to get back south. I was working on the boat. The south felt more like home. And we wanted mountains. We'd had flat for a very long time. And we're always vacationing in the mountains. So we looked at Knoxville, we looked at Asheville. Asheville is cute. Knoxville has seemed to have more of our kind of thing going on. And we were right in that judgment. And so chose Knoxville. And I'm interested about where we wound up living. And I'm pleased with it. Because as things happened, where we lived in Jackson, when we moved in, was lily white. In fact, the sellers of the house we bought were a bit taken aback. I asked the question, we have one or two black members in the congregation I'm serving. Would the neighborhood be upset if we had a church function here? They never thought about that. And I don't think the neighborhood would be upset. But by the time we moved from Jackson, that neighborhood was half black, half white. When we went house hunting in Elkhart, the house that actually best met our needs and fit the range we thought we could afford happened to be in a biracial community. And here we are in Parkridge. I like being someplace where my grandson or I can walk down the sidewalk and not have people think, what's he doing here? And that's not true everywhere in Knoxville by a long shot. And that's it wasn't a controlling factor in where we wound up, but it's an important factor. It really is. And
it's hard to find mountains and diversity together in a small sort of geographic range, and I think you've landed on precisely the right spot in the universe.
Yeah, there are not very many of them.
So you guys have been in Parkridge for what, 10 years?
It's going to be 12 years in October.
Does it feel like home?
Yes. Yeah.
You definitely have deep roots in the community in terms of your social involvement and your volunteer work.
Yeah, it's interesting how much at home we feel. We belong.